$100 a month. That's it. That's the number people keep throwing around as the secret to becoming a millionaire. And somewhere between that promise and your actual bank account, something doesn't add up. So which is it, math or marketing?
This is Rocket Finance. Today, we're running the actual numbers on what happens if you invest $100 a month, how much you really end up with, when you'd see it, and what the brochures conveniently leave out. Stick around and hit subscribe if you want the math without the motivational poster. It's the kind of breakdown that costs you nothing and saves you from a lot of nonsense later. Here's the thing about the personal finance industry. The $100 a month millionaire pitch isn't an accident. It's a marketing engine. Brokerages, robo-advisors, fintech apps, they all benefit when you open an account. And the easiest way to get you to open one is to dangle a 7-figure number in front of a 3-figure deposit. That number is technically true under very specific conditions, and those conditions are almost never the ones you're actually living in. You're not lazy, you're not bad with money. You're a rational person being pitched a best-case scenario as if it were the default scenario. So let's do the actual math, because this is where it gets interesting. If you invest $100 a month starting at age 20 and you earn a 10% annual return, which is roughly the long-term average of the S&P 500 with dividends reinvested, by age 65 you'd have about $1,048,000. You contributed $54,000 of your own money. The other $994,000 is compounding, doing its job over 45 years. That's the headline. That's the pitch. Now watch what happens when you shift the start date. Wait 10 years. Start at 30 instead of 20. Same $100, same 10% return, same discipline. You end up with about $379,000. You lost roughly 2/3 of the outcome by waiting 1/5 of the time. Picture a 31-year-old project coordinator in Columbus making $58,000 who finally feels stable enough to start investing. She did nothing wrong. She paid down student loans first. And the math still punishes her for that decade. Shorten the runway again. The motley fool ran the numbers on a 30-year window. $100 a month at 10%, and you land around $226,000. For context, that's roughly in line with the average 401k balance boomers are actually retiring with, which sits near $249,000 according to industry data. Not a million, not close. And here's where the brochure gets quieter. That 10% number is a long-term average, not an annual delivery. Goldman Sachs has clocked the S&P 500 around 13.6% average annual growth over the last decade, which sounds great until you remember that the previous decade included multiple 20% plus drawdowns. Academics call this sequence of returns risk. A 38-year-old nurse in Phoenix with $40,000 invested who watches her account drop to $28,000 in a single year. She's not looking at a chart. She's looking at her actual life. And if she pulls the money out, she locks in the loss and misses the recovery, which is statistically when most of the gains happen. Which brings us to why smart people make the wrong move here. The behavioral mechanism at work isn't greed. It's something researchers call the pain of paying, and its cousin, present bias. $100 today is concrete. You can feel it leaving your checking account. You know what it would have bought. The $1 million in 45 years is an abstraction. Your brain is not wired to trade a real, tangible loss now for a hypothetical gain you can't picture. Studies on intertemporal choice show this consistently. People will take $80 today over $120 a year from now, even when the math is obviously worse. So you don't start, or you start and then a bad month hits and you pause just for now, and the pause becomes the plan. The financial industry knows this. That's why every app has automatic transfers, roundups, and default enrollments. They're not being generous. They're removing the friction at exactly the point where your brain is most likely to talk you out of it. Whether you find that helpful or manipulative kind of depends on which side of the transaction you're on. Now, a few honest caveats. The S&P 500 returning 10% for the next 45 years is not guaranteed. Past performance, as the disclosures say in tiny print, is not a promise. Inflation eats into that million. $1 million in 2070 will not buy what $1 million buys today. And the just invest in an index fund advice, while broadly reasonable, assumes you have $100 a month of actual margin to invest, which, given that more than half of Americans report living paycheck to paycheck according to Bankrate, is its own structural problem. $100 a month, $1 million at the end. Is it real? It's mathematically real under a 45-year timeline, with a 10% average return, with zero withdrawals, with no panic selling, with consistent contributions through every recession, layoff, medical bill, and bear market between now and retirement. That is a very specific human being. That is not most of us. Here's the plain takeaway. $100 a month is worth doing, not because it'll make you a millionaire, but because starting at any amount, at any age, is mathematically better than waiting until you can afford to start seriously. You are not behind. The target moved. The pitch you've been sold compresses a 45-year story into a 30-second hook and then quietly blames you when your timeline doesn't match the brochure. The system isn't designed to tell you that the gap between $1,000 to $48,000 and $379,000 is just a decade of life happening to you. Run your own numbers. Start where you actually are. And if you want more breakdowns that respect your intelligence instead of selling you a fantasy, subscribe and stick around. This is Rocket Finance.